What if I told you the fear you feel right now isn't random? It's not weakness. It's not overthinking. It's not anxiety. It's programming. From the moment you were born, something has been shaping the way you think, the way you react, the way you doubt yourself. And most people never even realize it's happening. They just call it life. But here's the truth. Fear is not your enemy. It's a signal. A signal that something inside you knows you're meant for more, but something outside you wants you to stay small. Why do we hesitate when opportunity knocks? Why do we self-sabotage when we're close to success? Why do we feel paralyzed even when we know exactly what we need to do? Because fear doesn't scream, it whispers. It tells you, wait a little longer. You are not ready. What if you fail? What will people think? And the scariest part, what will people think? And the scariest part, that voice sounds like you. But what if it isn't? What if fear is a spiral, and every time you hesitate, you step deeper into it? Tonight, we're exposing the spiral. We're breaking down how fear quietly controls your decisions, your relationships, your goals, and how you can take back control. Because once you see the spiral, you can't unsee it. And once you understand how it works, it loses its power. This isn't just another motivational talk. This is a wake-up call. If you've ever felt stuck, if you've ever doubted yourself, if you've ever felt like you're capable of more, but something keeps holding you back, stay with me. Because by the end of this video, you won't look at fear the same way again. Welcome to Fear Spiral. Let's begin. The invisible cage fear doesn't show up wearing a monster's face. It shows up wearing a logic. That's why it's so dangerous. It convinces you that staying in your comfort zone is being realistic. It convinces you that avoiding risk is being smart. It convinces you that settling is being grateful. And, slowly, without realizing it, you build a cage, not out of metal, out of excuses. Think about it. How many times have you told yourself, I'll start when I'm more confident. I'll try when things calm down. I'll speak up next time. Fear doesn't block you instantly. It delays you. And delay becomes habit. Habit becomes identity. And identity becomes your life. This is the spiral. Step 1, doubt. Step 2, delay. Step 3, justification. Step 4, regret. And then it loops over and over again. The scariest part, it feels normal because everyone around you is spiraling too. Look at society. People hate their jobs but stay for security. People stay in toxic situations because they are afraid of being alone. People bury their talents because they're afraid of being judged. Fear has convinced the world that safety is success, but safety without growth is just slow decay. And deep down, you know it. That restless feeling you get at night, that voice that says, you're meant for more, that's not ego. That's awareness, but awareness is uncomfortable. Because once you realize you're capable of more, you can't blame circumstances anymore. You can't blame luck. You can't blame timing. Now the responsibility is yours. And responsibility triggers fear. Fear says if you try and fail, it's on you. So what do most people do? They never fully try. They half commit. Half effort protects the ego. Because if you don't give 100%, you can always say, could have done better if I really tried. But that's another layer of the spiral. Protection feels safe, but it blocks power. Let me ask you something. What would you attempt if you knew no one would judge you? What would you say if you knew you wouldn't be rejected? What would you build if failure wasn't permanent? That version of you, the fearless one, already exists. Fear just keeps interrupting it. And fear is clever. It studies your insecurities. If you fear embarrassment, it threatens humiliation. If you fear embarrassment, it threatens humiliation. If you fear rejection, it threatens loneliness. If you fear failure, it threatens exposure. It adapts. But here's what fear doesn't want you to know. It survives on imagination. Most of what you fear never actually happens. And when something does go wrong, it's rarely as catastrophic as your mind predicted. Fear exaggerates. It zooms in on worst-case scenarios. It plays dramatic trailers in your head of events that haven't even happened, and your body reacts as if they're real. Heart racing, palms sweating, voice shaking, all from a movie your mind created. But here's the turning point. Fear is not trying to destroy you, it's trying to protect you. The problem? It's using outdated information. Your brain evolved to protect you from physical danger. Wild animals, harsh environments, immediate threats. But today, the threat is public speaking, posting a video, starting a business, having a hard conversation. Your brain can't tell the difference between social discomfort and survival danger. So it reacts the same way, and you interpret that reaction as a stop sign. But what if it's actually a green light? What if fear shows up precisely when you're about to grow? Think about every major breakthrough in your life. Before it happened, you were nervous. Before you leveled up, you were uncertain. Before you changed, you were uncomfortable. Growth and fear arrive together. The difference between people who evolve and people who stay stuck. Action, not the absence of fear. Action despite fear. Let's destroy a myth right now. Courage is not fearlessness. Courage is movement while afraid. The spiral convinces you that you must eliminate fear before you act. That's a lie. Fear shrinks when confronted. It grows when avoided. Every time you avoid something because it scares you, the spiral tightens. Every time you face something despite fear, the spiral loosens. It's not about giant leaps. It's about micro-rebellion. Speaking up once, trying once, posting once, starting once. Because confidence is not a prerequisite, it's a result. And here's another uncomfortable truth. Sometimes fear disguises itself as perfectionism. I need more time. I need better equipment. I need to learn more first. Improvement is good, but endless preparation, that's fear in a lab coat. Perfectionism delays exposure. And exposure feels dangerous, but exposure builds strength. Think of it like a muscle. If you never challenge it, it never grows. Fear wants comfort, but comfort weakens potential. Imagine living the next 5 years exactly as you are now. Same habits, same excuses, same hesitation. Does that excite you, or does it terrify you? Because that's the real fear, not failure. Stagnation. At the end of life, stagnation. At the end of life, most people don't regret the risks they took. They regret the risks they didn't take, the conversations they avoided, the dreams they postponed, the versions of themselves they never became. The spiral doesn't just steal opportunities. It steals identity. It convinces you that you are less than you truly are, but awareness breaks patterns. And you're here, watching this, which means part of you is ready. Ready to question the excuses. Ready to confront the hesitation. Ready to step outside the invisible cage. And here's the first step. Notice the spiral. Catch the voice when it says, "Not now." Ask it, is this protection or limitation? Separate intuition from fear. Intuition is calm. Fear is loud. Intuition guides. Fear panics. Learn the difference, because once you do, you stop obeying every anxious thought. You start choosing consciously. And choice is power. Right now, somewhere in your life, there's a decision waiting, a call you need to make, a step you need to take, a move you've been delaying. Fear is guarding it. But what if that door is the one that changes everything? The spiral feeds on hesitation. Starve it with action, even imperfect action. even imperfect action, because imperfect action builds momentum. Momentum builds confidence. Confidence builds transformation, and transformation breaks spirals. This is not about becoming reckless. It's about becoming deliberate. You don't silence fear, you outgrow it. And growth begins with a single decision. A decision to stop spiraling and start rising. 1. The cabin on Echo Ridge. The Lewis family didn't need an adventure. They needed a break. Dan had been buried in overtime for months. Maria was balancing freelance deadlines and 2 energetic kids. Ava, 9 years old, curious and imaginative. Tommy, 6, glued to his mother's side. When Dan found the listing, a remote cabin on Echo Ridge, it felt perfect. No internet, no neighbors, no distractions. Maria hesitated. No signal? She asked. Dan smiled. Exactly. Peace. Simplicity, nature. That's what he promised. The drive up the mountain grew narrower with every mile. Gravel replaced pavement. Trees thickened. The air changed by the time they reached the clearing. The sun was low and shadows stretched long across the forest floor. The cabin stood alone. Wraparound porch, stacked firewood, stillness. Inside, it was rustic but warm. Old wooden floors, vintage furniture, a stone fireplace that crackled once Dan got it going. No television, no Wi-Fi, no reception. Exactly what he promised. The first day was almost magical. Board games, marshmallows over the fire, stories told under lantern light. But the silence of the forest was different, not peaceful, heavy. As if the woods weren't empty, just holding their breath. That night, they slept beneath thick blankets, the wind whispering through trees. The second night changed everything. Just after bedtime, Ava's voice trembled from upstairs. Dad, someone's knocking on my window. Dan grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside. Fog rolled low across the clearing. He circled the cabin. Nothing. Just trees. Just silence. He told Ava it was probably a branch. But the next morning, in the mud beside the porch, Dan found footprints, large, deep, not animal, not child, fresh. Maria stared at them too long. Dan brushed it off. Probably hikers. But that night, the air inside the cabin felt different. The kids were quiet. Tommy wouldn't let go of Maria's hand. Dan locked every window, braced the door. At 2 a.m., the knocking started again. Not one window, all of them. Soft at first, then deliberate, then synchronized. Dan ran outside. Flashlight beam cutting through fog. Nothing but the feeling of being watched. When he came back inside, Maria was holding Tommy. Then, a scream. Ave's room was empty, window open, curtains swaying. No sound of struggle, no broken glass. Just absence. They searched the forest until sunrise. Called authorities using an emergency satellite phone. Search teams came. Drones, dogs, volunteers. Nothing. A week later, a wildlife camera from a ridge trail was recovered. The photo showed something tall, distorted, almost human. Beside it stood a small barefoot girl, staring directly into the lens. Authorities called it an abduction. No suspects, no answers back home. Tommy eventually whispered something to his mother. It was the man from the trees. You saw him. Tommy nodded. He told me not to tell. He said if I did, he'd come back. Dan still drives up to Echo Ridge every weekend. He leaves offerings, a stuffed animal, a snack she loved, notes begging for her return. One morning, he found her hairband tied to a branch, clean, untouched by weather. It hadn't been there the night before. Locals say Echo Ridge is older than the forest around it. That something waits in quiet places. And just before sunrise, when fog is thick, You can still hear knocking. Highway 13 Motel, 7 hours on the road. That's how long the Carsons had been driving when the tire blew. The sun was sinking fast, painting the sky in dull orange as the car lurched violently to the side of the highway. Rural land stretched endlessly around them. No gas stations, no houses, no signal. Dan stepped out, muttering under his breath as he inspected the shredded rubber. Ellie tried to keep 6-year-old Sophie distracted in the back seat. The air felt heavy, too still. That's when they saw it. A faded sign, barely uprival turnoff, Highway 13 Motel. Vacancy. The neon letters flickered weakly. It wasn't inviting. Vacancy. The neon letters flickered weakly. It was waiting. They didn't have many options. The parking lot held 5 or 6 cars. No visible people. No sound. Just heat rising off cracked asphalt. Inside, the lobby light buzzed overhead. Behind the desk sat a woman with stringy gray hair and a cigarette burning slowly between her fingers. Her eyes didn't quite focus on them. "One room?" she asked flatly. Dan nodded. "Just the night." She slid an old brass key across the counter. "Room 7. Then she added something strange. "Don't open the door after dark." She didn't explain. She didn't smile. The room smelled stale. Mold, and something faint beneath it. Metallic. The air conditioner rattled but didn't cool. The television showed nothing but static. They went to bed uneasy. At exactly 1:13 a.m., Ellie woke up. Footsteps. Slow. Dragging, right outside their door. They didn't pass. They stopped. Dan sat up slowly. "Probably another guest," he whispered. The footsteps didn't move. They lingered. Then, knock. Not sharp. Not urgent. Dull, almost like something soft tapping against wood. Dan crept to the door, looked through the peephole. Nothing, just the dim hallway light. The knocking stopped. Silence returned. Morning came too quickly. When they stepped outside, the parking lot was empty. Every car was gone. Ellie returned the key to the front desk. "Did someone knock on our door last night?" she asked carefully. The woman lit another cigarette. "Don't open the door after dark," she repeated. "They remember when you do." That was enough. They packed fast. As they reached the car, Ellie froze. A folded note sat under the windshield wiper. The ink was smeared. "We liked your daughter's laugh. Bring her back." Ellie's heart pounded. Ellie's heart pounded. Sophie was already buckled in the back seat, humming softly. Then Dan saw it. Smudges on the outside of her window. Greasy. Trailing, as if something had pressed against the glass. They drove in silence. No one looked back. Later that night, at a different hotel 2 hours away, Ellie helped Sophie wash her hands. That's when she saw it. A pale handprint beneath Sophie's collar. Too large to be hers. "Sophie," Ellie whispered, trying to steady her voice. "Sophie," Ellie whispered, trying to steady her voice. "Did someone talk to you last night?" Sophie smiled faintly. "They told me stories through the window." "What kind of stories?" Sophie paused, then whispered, "How they're going to take you next." After that, they didn't stop driving. For days, Sophie grew quieter. Sometimes, she would hum songs no one recognized. Once Ellie caught her whispering to the trees as they passed. When they finally returned home, a package waited on their doorstep. No return address. Inside, a cassette tape. Dan played it, static at first. Then footsteps. Then Sophie's laugh. Then other voices laughing with her. And finally, a whisper. "Next time, open the door." Ellie destroyed the tape, but it didn't matter. Every night at 1:13 a.m., the knocking starts again. Only now, it comes from inside the house. The trail behind the falls, the Martins loved road trips. Photo albums, national parks adventure. Red Hollow National Park was supposed to be another memory. David and Aaron, their teenage daughter Lily, 8-year-old Sam. Silver Drop Falls was advertised as an easy hike, scenic, family-friendly. Near the ranger station, an older man watched them closely. "There's a trail behind the falls," he said quietly. "Not on the map." David chuckled. The man didn't. "Only go if you want the mountain to remember you." They forgot his words once they reached the waterfall. The roar of water drowned everything else. That's when Lily noticed it. A narrow path hidden behind the curtain of falling water. Faint, but walkable. Adventure, that's what David called it. The deeper they walked, the quieter it became. No birds, no insects. The air felt thick, the trees bent inward, like ribs forming a cage. David checked his compass. The needle spun endlessly. GPS wouldn't load. They kept walking. After an hour, they saw the first tree, names carved into bark. Layer upon layer, hundreds of them. Aaron leaned closer. David froze. One name stood out. Martin. Below it, today's date. The carving looked old, weathered. Today's date, years deep. Panic spread quickly. They tried to turn back. The trail was gone, overgrown, as if it hadn't been touched in decades. Dusk fell too fast. They stumbled into a clearing, perfectly round. Too perfect, old collapsed tents, cold fire pits, dozens of shoes scattered across the ground, none paired. Then the wind shifted, soft at first, then shaping into syllables. Then, their names, David, Aaron, Lily, Sam. They huddled together through the night. They heard movement, breathing branches snapping. But every time David shone the flashlight, nothing. By morning, only Sam returned. A ranger found him walking barefoot along the road, clothes torn, eyes distant. "What happened?" they asked. Sam whispered, "They said I could go if I forgot their names." The Martins were never found. The trail behind Silver Drop Falls does not appear on official maps. Rangers dismiss stories, but hikers speak quietly. About wind that whispers names, about shoes in the forest, about deals made in the dark. If you ever find a trail behind a waterfall, turn back, because if the mountain remembers you, you won't leave the same. Mount Ellery. The last ride up, the Connolly family loved autumn. Ben and Amanda planned the trip as a reset. Their teenage twins, Chloe and Jake, weren't thrilled, but even they admitted Vermont in the fall had a certain magic. Mount Ellery wasn't famous. Mount Ellery wasn't famous. No influencer posts, no glossy brochures, no trending travel tags. Just an old gondola system that had been running since the 1960s and a base lodge that looked untouched by time. That's what drew them in. Quiet, uncrowded, disconnected. When they arrived, the parking lot was empty. Fog rolled lazily down the slope. Above them, the gondola cables creaked softly in the wind. A thin, pale man stood inside the small ticket shack. His name tag read Walter. "You folks sure about heading up today?" he asked, glancing toward the fog. Ben smiled. "That's why we came." Walter slid the tickets across slowly. "You'll be the last ride up today. We shut down at 5. Something about the way he said it lingered. The gondola door clanked shut behind them. With a heavy lurch, they began to rise. At first, everything was beautiful. Orange and crimson trees stretched endlessly below. Chloe snapped photos. Jake leaned back, unimpressed but calm. Halfway up, the gondola jolted. Hard. Chloe's phone slid across the seat. "What was that?" Amanda asked. "Probably a stall," Ben said. But the gondola didn't start again. Minutes passed, then more. The radio crackled with static. No voice, no instructions. Phones had no signal. The fog thickened. Jake looked down. Is it just me, or does the forest look different? They all leaned toward the glass. The brilliant autumn colors were gone. The trees below looked dark, scorched, leafless, bent inward unnaturally. This isn't the same view, Chloe whispered. Then, tap, soft, behind her head. She spun around. Nothing but fog. Tap, tap, tap. This time on the opposite window. The sound moved. The sound moved, circling them. Then came scraping beneath the gondola. Metal against something. Something climbing. The cabin swayed gently. Then harder. Amanda gripped Jake's hand. Ben tried the radio again. Only static. The fog shifted just enough for them to see shapes below. Tall, thin, standing between trees, unmoving, watching. One of the shapes tilted its head. Then it began rising. Not climbing the cable. Not touching the trees. Just rising through the fog. The gondola jerked violently. Jerked violently, as if something had grabbed onto its underside. They screamed. Then, silence. No movement. No tapping. Just darkness. No movement. No tapping. Just darkness. When the sun rose the next morning, the gondola was back at the base station. Inside, only Chloe, curled into herself, frost covering her jacket, eyes wide, unfocused. When rangers asked what happened, she rocked gently back and forth. Hours later, she whispered one sentence. It wasn't a mountain. It was watching us. The gondola has been closed ever since. Locals don't talk about Mount Ellery, but on certain fog-heavy mornings, people say they hear the faint creak of cables moving and tapping on their windows, far above the ground. The lake that never reflected, the Reynolds family wanted stillness. Amanda, Greg, their daughter Lily, and 8-year-old Ethan escaped the city for a quiet cabin in Blackwood County. Amanda remembered the lake from her childhood. Oval, perfectly still. Almost too still. When they arrived, everything felt peaceful. No boats, no neighbors, no signal. The lake mirrored the sky so perfectly it blurred the line between reflection and reality. The second morning, Greg stood at the shore, holding coffee. Amanda joined him. Then she froze. Do you see that? Greg followed her gaze. The trees reflected. The hills reflected. The mist reflected. They did not. There was no image of them in the water. Greg shifted left. Right. Nothing. Lily joined them. Why can't I see us? They tried to dismiss it. Lighting, angle, imagination. But the next day, it happened again. A park ranger named June visited to check permits. Amanda casually asked her to step to the water's edge. June's reflection appeared clearly. The families did not. June didn't speak about it, but her face changed. That night, Amanda woke to creaking wood, soft footsteps on the dock. She peeked through the curtain. Ethan stood at the edge of the water, speaking softly. To who? She whispered, rushing outside. He turned slowly. They're showing us what we are. She brought him inside. The next morning, Ethan was gone. No splashes. No struggle. Just a small handprint pressed into damp wood beneath the dock. June returned. Stood at the lake, silent. Then she said something strange. Sometimes it remembers people. If it does, it keeps them. That evening, Amanda stood at the water again. This time, her reflection appeared, but it didn't match her movements. She lifted her hand. It didn't. It smiled. She wasn't smiling. Lily screamed. Her reflection was mouthing something, silently. Words they couldn't hear. Later, Lily insisted it said, "He's not gone." They packed immediately. But the road twisted strangely, looping past the same broken pine tree. 3 times, Eventually, they found the highway. They never saw Ethan again. Weeks later, Amanda received an envelope. No return address. Inside, an old black and white photograph of the lake, barely visible beneath the water, a child's face, eyes open, mouth reaching upward, and on the dock, 4 blurred figures watching, 2 adults, 2 children, one with his arm outstretched, pointing. Amanda destroyed the photo, but sometimes, in mirrors, her reflection lingers half a second too long. And beneath the surface, she swears she sees Ethan's hand, reaching upward. Fear spiral. Why quiet places choose us. Cinematic psychological horror script. What if the quiet wasn't quiet at all? What if the quiet wasn't quiet at all? What if the stillness, the isolation, the empty spaces weren't empty? The families you just met, the Lewises, the Carsons, the Martins, the Connellys, the Reynolds, they didn't stumble into tragedy. They walked into awareness, a truth most people never want to see. Quiet places aren't passive. They notice, they calculate, they remember, and the deeper you go, the more they take. The strange thing is, it isn't immediate. It doesn't scream or chase. It waits. Patient. It waits, patient. It studies your patterns, your attention, your fear. It knows when you're alone, when you're distracted, when you're vulnerable. And it doesn't just want to scare you, it wants to teach you a lesson you may not survive. Tonight, we go beyond the knocks, the whispers, the reflections that lie. We dive into the patterns, the methods, the reasons, because these places, they are not haunted in the way movies pretend. They're alive in a different sense. And once they choose you, you are never the same again. The psychology of isolation. Isolation has a strange effect on humans. When we are disconnected from others, from noise, from the constant hum of normal life, our minds start to notice things we normally ignore. A reflection that doesn't mirror. Footsteps that don't belong to anyone. Shapes moving just out of the corner of your eye. Your brain doesn't know what's real. It fills the gaps with fear. But here's the twist. In these stories, fear isn't just in the mind. It's in the environment. Echo Ridge, Highway 13 Motel, the Silver Drop Falls Trail, Mount Ellery, Blackwood Lake. All of them share the same patterns. Boy isolation from the world. No internet, no signal, no neighbors. Boy fixed silence. That feels wrong. Too still, almost expectant. Fears shifting perception. Paths vanish. Reflections lie. Shapes appear. Decade interaction. The place responds to presence. Notice the pattern. It's as if these places learn from you. And then they choose. How fear becomes a spiral. Think back to the Lewises. Dan and Maria's family fell into hesitation, doubt, and panic as each strange event unfolded. Notice the progression. 1. Uncertainty. A knock at the window. 2. Observation. Footprints in the mud. Strange noises. 3. Confrontation. They venture outside. Investigate. 4. Loss. Ava disappears. Each step feeds the next. The Carsons experienced it too. Fear. Strange Notes by Kipsan Prinsby. Strange Notes. Their fear amplified each event. The Martins, the trail behind the waterfall was a perfect spiral. Step forward, step back. See something, panic. Hesitate, keep moving. Every decision feeds the place. Every fear builds it stronger. This is why we call it the fear spiral. It's not random. It's intentional. And it targets what humans are most vulnerable to: uncertainty and isolation. Environmental awareness. Every location had unique signs. Feature Echo Ridge, trees that seem alive, observing. Orbit Highway 13 Motel. The building itself responded to action, rewarding silence and punishing curiosity. Fear, silver drop falls. Nature bent and twisted around presence. Bok-pick Mount Ellery. Fog amplified shapes and obscured paths. Fear's Blackwood Lake. Reflections manipulated perception, even altered movement. These were all environmental triggers. They exploited human perception, depth perception in fog, peripheral vision in darkness, depth perception in fog, peripheral vision in reflective surfaces. Our brains are wired to detect anomalies. These places knew it. They played with it. You don't survive by ignoring the environment. You survive by reading it correctly. And even then, survival isn't guaranteed. The pattern of choice, one thing unites every story. The victims were noticed before anything happened. Bokib-Abe's curiosity brought her closer to the edge. Bokib-Sophie's laughter was marked by the motel. Dedic Sam on the waterfall trail followed curiosity into danger. Dedic Sam's shapes listened to tapping and engaged with the unknown. By a pig, the Reynolds family observed the lake too closely. Each time, the place marked them, and it chose them. It isn't about morality. It isn't about punishment. It's about attention. Notice how, in all the stories, the place's deification respond to presence. By escalate tension when attention is focused. Bokib remain passive if ignored. They teach a simple rule. Engage with the unknown, and you enter the spiral. Ignore it, and you might escape. The spiral connects everything. Now step back. What do all these locations have in common? Diabic, isolation, diattention, pegurosity, 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 pegurosity. From the moment you step into silence, the place begins studying you. It observes your patterns, your reactions. Every hesitation, every glance, every whisper, recorded. Every fear amplified. The fear spiral is not just an event. It's a system. Poig Ava's disappearance was the output of the spiral at Echo Ridge. Fears, Sophie's haunting at Highway 13 Motel. Another output. Oid, Sam lost in the Silver Drop Falls. Another node in the same network. Feature, Mount Ellery. A place that adapts in real time. Blackwood Lake. The spiral even manipulates mirrors. It is everywhere we are vulnerable, quiet, alone, observed. How to recognize a spiral? Here are the signs. 1. The quiet feels wrong. 2. Shapes, reflections, or paths shift in ways that defy explanation. 3. Time seems inconsistent. Hours pass like minutes, minutes like hours. 4. The place responds to you. Taps, scrapes, notes, footprints. 5. Curiosity triggers escalation. Recognizing these signs is the first step. Confronting them? Not recommended. Because the spiral doesn't just watch, it learns. Surviving the spiral. If you ever find yourself inside a fear spiral, if you ever find yourself inside a fear spiral, if you ever find yourself, if you afford curiosity traps, avoid engagement with unusual stimuli. Fear, retreat before escalation. Silence and observation, not reaction, is your ally. The spiral isn't evil. It isn't human. It's an intelligence built around attention and fear. The more you resist, the more it can't act. The more you react, the deeper you fall. In psychology, this is called escalating feedback loops. In the world of fear's spiral, it's survival. Closing thoughts, these places are everywhere. The mountain you hike, the lake you swim in, the motel on a lonely highway, the cabin tucked deep in the woods. They're quiet, they're still. And they're aware some people escape. Some are marked forever, and all of them leave a trace. The next time you feel that quiet feeling, that stillness that feels heavier than it should, listen carefully, notice, do not engage, because the fear spiral is patient, and it remembers. You've seen them tonight, the families, the cabins, The motels, the trails, the lakes, the mountains, each story different, each place unique. Yet all of them share the same truth. Quiet places are never truly empty. They observe, they wait, they choose. Ava, Sophie, Sam, Ethan. They weren't victims of random chance. They were noticed, marked, pulled into the spiral. And the spiral, it's patient. It doesn't rush. It doesn't scream. It doesn't chase. It simply waits for the perfect moment to reveal itself. The fear spiral doesn't just exist in the mountains or lakes. It exists wherever humans are quiet, alone, and curious. It exists in the spaces we think are safe. It exists in the reflections we trust, in the silence we crave. And if you ever feel that silence pressing a little too close, if you hear taps, footsteps, whispers, if a reflection lingers just a moment too long, stop. Don't investigate. Don't call attention to yourself. Don't react, because the spiral is patient. It learns from your fear. It grows stronger with your attention. This is why these stories matter. Not to scare you for the sake of it. Not to thrill you for a moment and let it pass. They matter because awareness is survival. Quiet places, forgotten paths, isolated cabins. They're teaching us, testing us, challenging the human instinct to look closer, to touch, to explore. Some people escape. Some never do. And some, they come back changed. Changed enough to warn the next person, to whisper the truth, to leave us with only questions, only caution, only the lingering chill that perhaps we're next. If there's one thing to take from tonight's stories, pay attention to the quiet. Notice the stillness. Respect the places that observe. Because fear isn't always the monster. Sometimes fear is a guide, a warning, a spiral you don't want to enter. Thank you for joining me tonight on Fear Spiral. If these stories unsettled you, if you felt the tapping, the whispers, the lingering eyes from the dark, remember to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell. We have more hidden places, strange phenomena, and stories that blur the line between perception and reality waiting for you. And until next time, stay aware, stay cautious, and never, ever underestimate the places that watch back.